Okay, we're back. It's Monday night, June 6th. This is our last session of this season. We've been talking about Finding Latinx, In Search of the Voices Redefining Latino Identity by Paola Ramos. Welcome to the discussion. I hope everyone's been reading along. This is a great book. It's a great topic, and we just happen to be ending the first week of Pride Month. So let's say Happy Pride Month to everybody. Every month is Pride Month, but I wanted to make sure that, we address our monthly celebrations. So I wanted to put that out there. And then I want to remind everyone that I'm doing fundraising for the nonprofit that I started, Feisty Fellowships, and that also to help fund continuing this project and to purchase books and get gifts for the guests and things like that. So this is the store. It's on Bonfire, and I do have a new design that I wanted to share real quick. It is based on what I've been sharing on my Instagram account. So here's the store. And these new shirts here, drink water, bitches. They come in different colors. Drink water, bitches. Okay. And then, of course, the same designs from before, of like fromage, because we like things with cheese. No more fucks to give mugs and shirts. And all the money goes to funding these projects that we work on for Epic. Okay. All right. Last session, Finding Latinx. Let's bring our guests on. I'm going to bring on Richard McCrow, who's been here since the beginning and is here every week.
Yep. Still sitting in the same seat. Been here for weeks.
Yep. And then this week we have a special guest. We haven't seen her at all this season, so I'm so glad to see her today. Welcome, Angelle, Maua. Hello.
Hello.
Happy Monday.
Hi.
Happy Pride.
Sorry, my thing is so dark. I need to get one of those lights. I didn't think I'd be doing this often. You know what I mean?
Surprising, isn't it?
It's like, wow, I'm actually going to have to get a ring light. This is ridiculous.
That's funny. Yeah, I went ahead and got one too.
It's like
it just helps. Okay. So thank you both for joining us for this last session. This last chapter, shorter than a lot of the others. She's really wrapping up the main ideas throughout, her travels. So I'll pull up quotes from the chapter and we can discuss it, sharing our personal experiences. Anything anyone wants to share before we get started?
No, I just want to say Happy Pride Month.
Yay, Happy Pride.
Yay, Happy Pride Month.
I will say, I don't know if I sound weird or not. In my head, I sound weird. I have a cold, and so if that affects my voice, I don't know.
It's a deeper voice.
Yeah, it's raspy. I wish I could sing, but okay.
Your raspy voice.
Yeah. I guess I'd have to have talent also. Okay, so as we're wrapping up this journey that Paola Ramos took across the United States, meeting people, different parts of the country, finding these communities that even for, she's admitting, saying, I didn't consider this. That's my own biases that I have, that I didn't consider these things. So these two things that these two banners that I'm putting up are kind of like the main things that she discovered. So Latinas abided by gender norms, queer people loved in shame, indigenous folks coexisted in silence, farm workers normalized their pain, Afro-Latinos felt erased, undocumented parents resisted fear, and youths carry the burdens of generational trauma. So this is sort of like kind of a summary of the whole book. the communities that she was visiting and the people that she talked to, this is what came out of those stories. Any comments on these sort of bigger ideas? And drill down a little bit.
Oh, go ahead, Richard. Were you going to say something?
No, go ahead. Go ahead.
I guess when she first started out the book, she went into, I think it was like page 3 or 4, how we always used to use the word Latino, you know what I mean? And then we started using Latina to be inclusive of the Spanish women. And then she went in to explain Latinx, remember? But the X has been used for years. It just now resurfaced again, and that was something that she felt comfortable with, like that's something that resonated with her.
Right.
So that's when she gets into the Latinas abided by gender norms. But Latinx is kind of like a sketchy term to use. I shouldn't say sketchy. Let me back up. Latinx is kind of a hard term to use too as an umbrella term, because then you have the argument of our Latinas and those in between feeling erased because maybe they don't connect or resonate with the X behind Latin. You know what I mean? So that's like a whole other argument. And then that's kind of like spilled into the Latinas abiding by gender norms, and what everybody's narrative around gender norms is different, right? Certain roles, expectations, like your gender norm might be different from my gender norm. And what is that? What does that look like? But the basis of it is, they have certain duties to do as women in the family and carry out certain roles and expectations, as a Latina in a family setting or in society,
Yeah, that's an argument. I mean, people go back and forth, and when I go through some comments on social media when things like this come up, when the questions are posed, and there's always an argument. The arguments go back and forth because people, I feel like it's usually straight people who are saying, I'm going to use Latino, you're not going to, or Latinas, like, this is how I identify. And it's like, nobody's telling you have to do, nobody's forcing it on you. We're just saying we want to be more inclusive. And so if someone wants to use it, we're saying, let's all use it. There's also an E used at the end instead of the
Latine. Was it Latine? I don't know how to pronounce it.
Yeah,
but there's an E, A, and O. And now there's X.
Yeah. Okay, so
yeah.
what about
so that's, you know what? I always default to the person.
Right.
Okay. Right? Or a group of folks. Like what do you prefer? How do you feel? How does that resonate with you? And some are like, oh, it doesn't even matter. Or some people are like, oh, I prefer to be called Latina or Latino, and then some are like, oh, Latine, the E, that's what resonates. So yeah. But I like that is she brought that to the forefront. I mean, for discussion, because that's something we need, and brought a little history with it too as well, because I did not know. I thought the X was something new. I did not know that it was something that had been used before decades ago.
I thought this, I feel like this is something, this last one, youths carry the burdens of generational trauma. I feel like in the last few years, we've all been having this conversation because of the way that society is viewing the younger generations and their responsibilities, and then what they're asking from us, right? Almost why didn't you? Why couldn't you? Why are things the way they are now? And then trying to make changes. So within their own family structures, and then in their communities, and then like the country as a whole, and then like globally, these things they matter. They matter to the different generations in different ways. And I like that everywhere she went, there was there was also that conversation about what we're doing now, what like ancestors, but then also immediate family, generation before me, and then what's going to come after. There's always like the conversation of generationally how people are being affected. I really like that part of this book.
Yeah. And I think if we look back, at the storytellers in our own families, and you notice that each generation carried that generational trauma, because you got to look back into the 50s and 60s when women were evolving into their own separate selves. You know what I mean? You have the feminist movement, and then the civil rights movement. Those kids carry that generational trauma from that, right? And then now you look at my kid and his generation, they're moving forward the gender revolution and the civil rights movement in a different form due to George Floyd's death in 2020. And so they have layers of generational trauma. They have the civil rights, and especially if you're POC, the civil rights movement, getting equity and justice behind that. And then also reparations for my generation, you know what I mean? For those who are still slave, we still have living slaves, in our families, you know what I mean? There are still storytellers. And so every generation carries some form of trauma, but then we have to relive it, because then those storytellers are telling us about their traumas. And so it's getting layered on top of layer on top of layer. So now I'm like, what kind of trauma is my kid's going to have to? And I think it's going to be the political governmental structure trauma, like Trump and what we're going through. And the environment is the biggest thing due to political decisions that they've made regarding the climate and the environment. And that's going to be their huge generational trauma from us, because we did not heed the scientists when it came to global warming. So does that make sense?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, and people who want to make the argument that that's not, it's so beyond their understanding or so outside of their, their scope of understanding or their community, that they don't even want to have the conversation, as if the environment doesn't affect them.
Right, exactly. And every time somebody says, "Oh, I'm having a baby," or I'm like, I cringe, because it's like, what, and it's not that it's a bad thing, it's a blessing to have kids, but what kind of life are they going to have? What are we going to leave behind to them? You know what I mean? What kind of mess are they going to have to clean up because of 2 generations before them?
Yes.
It's going to be
Yeah,
horrible.
exactly. I cringe too. I admit it. It
See?
does make me go, ooh.
I know our generation has to cringe, because I'm just gonna put it out there. I do. Every time somebody says they're pregnant, I'm just, no,
No. Wait,
no.
let's skip a generation.
I know. Can we just like pause until we fix shit, and then you can start
Yeah.
out? You know what I mean? Yeah. No, that's not happening.
No.
Oh my God. We're gonna get comments. Okay. This sort of, it all goes back to caste, but this really reminded me of caste. So COVID-19 demonstrated that we have learned how to navigate systems that weren't built for us by filling in the gaps ourselves.
I thought of cast too. That's the first thing I thought of. It's like, oh my God, we are on repeat from cast. We are on repeat. This is such a repeat. Now you got monkeypox. That's throw monkeypox into the mix. You know what I mean? It's like they try to downplay it as much as they could, but this shit is here in the United States. It's been here. Now they have to actually cop to it. So,
God.
Yeah. So it's like you get this, and then now you're in a system that's not built to support us. So now how the fuck do we get through that? You know what I mean? You don't have health care. So how am I going to get the shot? Or how am I going to get treatment if I don't have any insurance? COVID has brought a lot of demons to the surface. I'm sorry. A lot of shit. And we can't keep up. It's like, how do we keep up? How do we just take care of each other? Do you know what I mean? when we're part of a system that doesn't recognize us or doesn't support us. Yeah, what do you do with that?
This wasn't okay. I'm going to say something that's going to sound shitty because, especially of what's been happening over the last couple of weeks with mass shootings, but it seemed like during that time, we couldn't have the conversation about why things were so fucked up. Like we couldn't talk about why things were the way they were.
I know where you're going with this.
White people were also put in these situations because they are healthcare workers, or, first responders, whatever. And so it was like, we can't talk about how fucked up everything is. We just have to make sure we're getting things, putting Band-Aids on everything as much as possible. Band-Aids on everything, duct tape on everything.
There was no mental support, no mental health support for those who were stuck with their spouse that they thought they knew, and then ended up getting divorced because, like, I don't even know who you are, or they got close, or they experienced losing loved ones around them, but then you couldn't get that ESA support because you lost your job,
right?
Because you needed to be there physically for your job to have a job.
Mm-hmm.
Or the ones that ended up working remote, they didn't know what working remote looks like, so of course they didn't know what remote healthcare support looked like. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. So all of us are sitting in the cesspool of mental health support. It's like rats in a, monkeys in a barrel, rats in a cage, just trying to climb out and just breathe and keep our head above water. And then now that they figured this shit all out, we're all nuts. We're batshit crazy. Everybody has lost their fucking minds. And you're right. We're so far gone in that area as far as we've reached new heights where we can't pull ourselves back in. Like we can't reel ourselves in enough to reach out to get the adequate support that we need. I'm hoping that makes sense because I knew exactly where you were going with that. It's like, it's almost really sad because if you have somebody who has suicidal ideations and they get to the point where they actually start to harm themselves, like lightly, like, okay, kind of test the waters. Like, I wonder what this is going to feel like. Okay, so this is going to feel like if I do this, you know what I mean? And then it's like, they've already made up their mind. How do you reel them back in? You know what I mean? How do you get them the help that they need? And some of them you can't get to, and they just feel like, okay, I'm going to go out by death by police. I'm going to go out suicide by death by police. You know what I mean? And that's what everybody's opting for right now. They knew that the police were going to kill them when they went in there and did what they did. Because they said, fuck it. I'm done. I can't do this anymore. You know what I mean? Because they didn't have the tools to navigate the system that wasn't built for them, like she said, and this is the result of it. I know we're going to get so many crazy comments. I'm sorry.
No, but the filling of the gaps, I think, is the problem, right? Because we're all trying to fill gaps in our own communities in whichever way that we can, and maybe this is, I mean, I'm not a political scientist, and I don't study history or the way our government is built, but this idea that we are realizing that there are some things that are not working, and communities shouldn't be having to do those stopgap.
We should not have to be filling in the gaps at all.
So there's like all these things that we want government to be responsible for, which means we have to be taxed, which means there's money. So there's like all these moving parts. But when it comes down to it, because the system was built the way that it was, we have to fight so much harder and wait so much longer for the bare necessities. And so that's It's just like this constant. And then COVID-19, fucked everybody's shit up. And so it was like, we really realized, like, oh, you thought that you would be okay?
Yeah, no.
They don't care about you either, man.
Right. But I want to say I do want to say a shout out to all those in the community that are actually doing the work and filling in those gaps, that are showing up and trying to house people, that are showing up and giving out hygiene kits, who are showing up on their social media and crowdsourcing and raising funds for, individuals that they know that need that extra support. You know what I mean? There are a lot of folks out there that are just showing up on so many different levels to fill in those gaps. And I just hope that it's reciprocated to them threefold. You know what I mean? And some people can't do a lot. You know what I mean? Like physically, I can't do a lot. Like I wish I could show up to a lot of different places, but I have asthma and I can't risk the chance of getting COVID because I know it would kill me. You know what I mean? It's just point blank period. Doctor's like, you catch COVID, then I really can't say what that's going to be like, even with the boosters and stuff, because I have really bad asthma. So I have to be very careful what spaces I navigate in and what events I choose to go to. And there's people out there like me that are still doing that, filling in those gaps and showing up for those people. And kudos to them, you know what I mean, for risking their own health to help fill in those gaps. So I just wanted to say that to those community members out there who are doing that work, because they're amazing. There's a lot of people out there being helped, but there's so many more that need help.
Right. Yeah, thank you for saying that. Okay. So we're going to talk a little bit about the word intersectionality doesn't come up in the banners that I'm going to pull up, but it's something that it just is, right? It's true. So part of the focus of the chapter was for Daniele Rodriguez del Orbe. She is an activist. And so there's this identity issue. She's from Dominican Republic, but moved to New York and then moved to LA. So she's experiencing all these different ways of identifying herself as an Afro-Latina. So she's an undocumented person, she's Latina, she's a Black woman, she's Dominican, she's a New Yorker.
I thought she was like Cuban and Mexican.
What?
Wasn't she Cuban and Mexican? Like she's Cuban, she was trying to identify with that. She was Mexican, but she was light skinned, but she wasn't dark. You know what I mean? There was like all these different intersectionalities of weird. Was she Cuban and Dominican?
Her, I don't think it was her. I don't know. Maybe I missed that part. Because she did talk about being in those different spaces, especially once she moved to California.
Right. Okay.
Okay. And then not identifying with the way that California, LA, but California specifically, identifies brown people, right? And where she's standing out. So I thought that was really interesting to me, because of the way that the book was written and the different communities across the United States, the different states that she was in, the different kinds of cultural groups from different kinds of Latin American people from all over Latin America, and the way that they identified in that community, and then how they would probably identify differently if they were in a different state, in a different neighborhood. And that's so interesting to me, that we have this sort of shifting identity, I guess, or the way that we identify. It depends on who you're around and what language is being used around you.
Right. Yeah. Okay. So it's page 3. She says, "I'm queer, Latina, I'm Cuban and Mexican, first generation."
Oh, that's the author.
American. Ah, okay. There we go. Okay.
Yeah. So Daniele, so this is there's a picture of her. Let me see if I can pull it up.
Yeah, it's further. Okay. Yep.
So on page 303.
303. Yep. I'm right there.
I think that's her in LA. So so she was talking about how she's someone who doesn't come from Mexico. So if she's in California, she doesn't come from Mexico. She doesn't have a relationship with the border. She isn't brown. She identifies as a Black woman, someone who doesn't fit perfectly into California's dominant narrative. So this is another issue. Actually, Paola Ramos did talk about this for herself, because she's, half Mexican, half. She's Mexican and Cuban, and light skin and light colored eyes. And so she's like, I was Cuban. I grew up in Miami, and that's like everyone around me looked like me. And so you grow up thinking that's what Latinos look like.
Mm-hmm.
That's what they sound like, right? The Spanish is a little bit different. So I like that this is kind of the conversation towards the end, really identifying like there's so many different ways to identify Latinx people across the United States, and then how they identify themselves.
Mm-hmm.
When you're in California, this is
It's
the way.
different.
Yeah, and we very
Yeah,
care very much, very connected to what's happening in Mexico at the border.
Yeah. Yeah, because she starts out in the beginning with that, and then
But
she ties it up with other identities similar to her. I like that. Yeah.
yeah, I also found it interesting. There was a comment in there about being a person of color, and the surprise when somebody like Letty would call herself a person of color, and saying, wait a minute, you're not a person of color. Like that, it's so different from the different coasts. And I understand the dialogue here in California, but I don't know if I would understand the dialogue in New York, for example. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah. I think there's a certain expectation when you say POC, you're supposed to look a certain way.
Right.
Yeah.
And Letty doesn't, fit that.
We do that to ourselves.
Right?
There's
Exactly.
colorism like within even
There's
like
colorism within our own communities. You know what I mean? Like in every community, like the Asian community, the African American community, the Latino community. You know what I mean? The Polynesian community. Everybody has a certain level of colorism. And it's funny because most Asians identify as white, and I still don't get that. I will never understand that.
Yeah.
But there's some others in African American, some people, I'm white. Okay, you are blacker than black, but you're white. Okay. Whatever you say. Be you.
So, well, this is good that you're talking about skin color. So just as skin color changes depending on where you stand in the country, so does language have the ability to become distorted under the different coordinates of the map. And it's like what Richard is saying, depending on where you are. That part of what she was saying, Richard, I'm glad you brought that up. It's going to be the next, I'll just bring it up now. So it's for me, what I hear from people like in my family, when anybody goes to Mexico to visit family in Mexico, and how they stand out because they are Americanized, right? Their Spanish is all messed up. They speak Spanglish, and you can tell that they're from the US. And so they're not Mexican enough in Mexico, regardless of the color of their skin. It's mostly about language. And that you're coming from the north. And so this idea that then there's this other level just within the US, that if you're going in over to the East Coast into a New York neighborhood, where you are like, you look like me, and you're saying I'm a person of color or I'm brown, and they're like, the hell you are.
You're white passing. You're not brown.
Right.
You pass.
So there's a different.
Yeah, that is a language thing, because I used to live on the East Coast too, and I would get the pass. Like, what do you mean I pass? What the hell? What? When you're little and you're a kid, you don't understand what pass means. You know what I mean? When you hear adults saying that. Yeah, that is so true. That is true. It is an East Coast, West Coast, huge language difference.
And I wonder too, how different it would be like in Florida, because again, if there's going to be like this big distinction between Afro-Latinos, Afro-Cubans, and the Cubans that are light skinned that come in and they're like, we're white, we identify as white, we're okay with the white label. It's just so interesting. It really depends on where you are in the US, and what kind of privilege, I guess we should say, is available to you, right? You're going to adjust depending on that.
True, and the community too. The community too.
And we were just talking the other day about the Latino voting bloc, and Latinos voting conservative, Republican. and that growth in that community. And so she talks about it here, like you can't count on a voting block. You've got to pay attention to what people need and what
Right.
their needs are, not just saying, and we talked about this before in Texas, a white guy speaking Spanish trying to gain the Latino vote. And it's just like, wait a minute, your Spanish isn't that good. And, and it's almost insulting. So, you got to be careful.
She did that, right? Didn't she? Wasn't Paola Ramos she had the special, I think, on MSNBC. I think I remember it being advertised. It was her that kind of was the moderator or something about. So she's obviously, I mean, she's in it. She's in this work for sure. I'm gonna go back to this for just a little bit. So this language, because I know we're talking about different communities and what we're using. I think that sometimes this is a problem. It's a problem within our own communities, but then it's also a problem because of the way that other people see us. And when I say other people, I mean white people, like non-Black people of color, right? What language are we using? How are we presenting ourselves in the community, so that what's the expectation that we're going to be treated a certain way? I feel like that sometimes the language can be so, I don't want to say divisive, but that because we're understanding it a certain way, that the people in the outside of our own little community are not able to deal with us the way we want to be dealt with, because we're not communicating our identity, our culture. If we're being too careful, maybe we're not really expressing what we need. So to me, that's where the language also gets distorted. And maybe it's.
Are you like referring to like just code switching, like when we're not kind of like?
I mean, that could be a distortion of language, right?
Yeah, code switching, because you're just like, okay, so we're talking in Spanish, right? Blah, 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 and then you show up to the conversation, and then we code switch and we start talking proper English. It's just so he can understand what we're talking about. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. And so no, he's not going to get an insight into our culture and who we are, and because he doesn't, one, understand Spanish, and two, understand why we did what we did.
Yes.
You know what I mean? So yeah, we call it code switching. So it's basically like we talk slang around each other, in the house or whatever, and then as soon as we're out in society, out and about, we speak proper English. You know what I mean? Because we would not be perceived as serious or educated or whatever. So
yes, there's definitely. Yeah, definitely code switching. But then also, I think maybe I'm thinking more of the way that how much we allow other people to know, and maybe it's all the code switching. That because we do that, are we protecting ourselves? Is it out of fear? Is it cast?
It's out of fear of judgment. It's out of fear of judgment. It's out of fear of being judged for speaking our slang, for being our 100% ratchet self, if that's what it is, or you know what I mean, or whatever you want to call it. Mm-hmm. It's just that fear of judgment. You know what I mean? It's being judged for who we authentically are. So we feel we have to conform to be accepted as a productive citizen in society if we present ourselves as, in their dialect. I mean, I don't even know how else to say that.
So it's like that assimilating also in
we
language.
Assimilate to accommodate them and not ourselves, which is really fucked up.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Okay. We did the East Coast. Okay, so and we talked about this already, but there's no one way to be Latino in the United States. There's not one way to feel Latino in the United States, not one way to look or sound Latino. At the very beginning of this, we kind of posed the question, the first week about what does it mean to be American? What does that feel like? What does it look like? And obviously there's not one answer, right? There's all these different ways. If you say American, like my vision is not necessarily going to be like what you envision. And so that's true for all of these different communities. And it's not, like why the idea of the melting pot doesn't work, because we don't all we're not assimilating and disappearing into the American void. We're all individual, and the communities all stand up and look different and sound different. But I think that we have to embrace this. This is not being embraced enough. The idea that there's not one way to be, whatever the label is.
Yeah.
And that's why for her, she is saying that, the only label that she felt really captured that collective truth and accommodates the spectrum is the Latinx banner.
Next banner. Mm-hmm. But that's her perspective,
Right.
Perspective and lens. That's what makes her. That's what resonates with her. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
But again, it might be like an A, an O, and an E at the end for somebody else.
Yeah, and I know this is way back in the beginning, but I loved that conversation she had with her grandpa about, and then he says, I'm Latinx too.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. When she broke it down and explained it to him, you know what I mean? And then he was like, oh, he had that aha moment. Like, okay. Well, I guess I'm Latinx too. Yeah.
Yeah, I love that. Okay, this is this almost hurt my feelings. Okay, language matters because unless you intentionally allow it to evolve, you risk erasing someone else's existence.
It does matter. I so vibe with this. Words hurt. Words matter. So you have to be very, 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 very careful of the words. Like I use profanity, so I need to stop doing that because some people are not cool with
I
it.
do too.
You know what I mean? So but language matters, just like pronouns matter. You don't know how people how they identify by the way they look. You can't assume anybody's identity. You know what I mean? So you have to be very careful in the language that you choose. And if you don't know, you ask or you introduce yourself with your pronouns, or you explain where you're coming from your perspective. And then that's when everybody walks away with their own opinion and respect for each other's perspective. But you have to be very intentional in the types of words and in the types of language that you use around others, because they hurt and they could erase somebody else's identity or existence because you're not acknowledging that. And then if you feel like, or if they feel like they're being erased, you have that conversation with them, like, what am I doing that is showing erasure to you, so I won't do it again? You know what I mean? And so it's a learning process. Everybody learns every single day. I don't think you fully learn anything, you know what I mean, unless you have that intentional dialogue with somebody. You won't know, so you just have to learn and just have conversations around it. But language matters a lot.
This to me, I feel like is also like the scientific community, the medical community, being able to come forward and say, we used to think this, and now this has changed. We've done some research, and this seems more probable that this is going to be the way things are in medicine or in science or whatever. And why we fight language, so why people get so offended by the way that we use words. It is evolving all the time. Slang is being used in all these different ways. Words are being made up by newer generations, and they just mean what they mean even if we don't understand them. So the idea that language is like not evolving all the time, it only offends you when it has to do with like race or gender. It's just like, it blows my mind that people think this way. But so this idea that it's constantly evolving and that we have to kind of let it go and see where it's describing things differently, and how we can identify things differently and understand things differently. I mean, Are we supposed to be trying to like keep understanding?
Right, we are, but then you have some old schoolers that cling to the science of everything. For example, gender. Okay, we can go back and forth about gender, how gender is fluid, and you're born with the XX chromosome and the XY chromosome, and that's science, and that's how it is, and it's binary, and I don't have any more discussion around it because that's how it is, and that's the science, right? Well, now you're just erasing who I am. You know what I mean? So you have that's one example of erasure, because somebody's just so rooted in this science behind XX and XY that they can't see beyond that because that's how science deemed it. That's what it is in the books. That's what the scientists say, and I'm sticking to it, and that's what it is. And then, but like you said, if we have the scientists and other people and researchers actually supporting the fluidity of language and different things around language, then I think people are more easier to grasp it. But then it goes back to, okay, I'm backtracking a little bit. Then it's going to go back to the whole Christianity Bible thing. You know what I mean? You got one people who cling to that. This is it. This is the Holy Grail. This is my being, end all, and everything. And you cannot contradict that because it's in this book. And this is what this book says. And that's how it is. You know what I mean? So what do you do with that mindset?
So I have this idea. It's off topic a little bit, but it has to do with the same sort of thinking. I'm struggling right now to figure out whether or not I have ADHD. And the more I research and read and talk to people and watch videos and listen to doctors, you can find a lot of really great information on social media, actually. And the more I think about it and how complex our brains are, I keep leaning towards we all have these neurological things that don't necessarily seem like what we've been told normal is. And so what if all of the people that have these neurodivergent things are actually the majority?
They are, because there's no such thing as normal.
Exactly.
There's no such thing as normal.
So the systems are built by people who just wanted, it could be religion-based, discipline-based, control-based. And there's so few of them. And that's why so many of us fight against, right? And so to me, that's kind of like that same idea, is that like with gender or language, that these things are constantly changing, and the people who can't understand it are actually in the minority.
They are. That's why we have so many Karens and Chads and crazy people right now, because they know that they're the minority. You know what I mean? They know that they don't understand, and they won't understand, and they're scared. Like, oh my God, there's so few of us. So what are we gonna do? Okay, so I'm gonna act crazy. I'm gonna make people accountable. I'm gonna be that person because I don't know. I'm scared. What do I do? You know what I mean? Yeah.
Yes, it is out of fear. Yeah, that makes sense. You don't understand the way people are behaving because it just doesn't even occur to you that there are other possibilities.
Mm-hmm.
What a sad existence,
right?
Well, no, it's sad, and it's also frightening. If somebody believes that God is the big savior, and I'm always going to be okay because I've got God, which I understand some people believe that way, and then suddenly you're challenging them. It's so frightening that they don't want to give it up. And so some of these conversations we have, it's not just religion, but in other aspects of being white, they're so afraid of losing something that they continue to throw it back at you. And I just, and so it's sort of like, even, now when we get to the discussion of medicine, medicine can be wrong, in a lot of cases, and what we're talking about. And I mean, you can see it in the doctor that you go to, if they're really stuck somewhere and they're saying some things that are just truly wrong, even though, we're smart individuals. We do our own research now, and we find things that are legit. And we ask the doctor, I found this online, and this is what it means, and I have these symptoms, and I'm concerned. And more often than not, those doctors will turn on you. They'll
Yep.
turn on you and say, don't be reading the internet. Don't be going there and doing my job because I got the knowledge up here on what you are. And I know Letty's experienced that. I've experienced it and others, but it truly is. We all get really scared, like somebody's intruding on our territory.
Right.
I don't understand.
Yeah, like we're not supposed to be that smart to do our own research so we can go. Like I have a broken clavicle. I knew I had a broken clavicle. I went in and told the doctor I have a broken clavicle. Oh, no,
God.
you probably just had a sprain or you tweaked it or whatever. No, I have a broken clavicle. And then finally, 4 or 5 doctors later, like, yeah, you probably have a broken clavicle. Yeah, I've been trying to tell you idiots that. And now it calcified. Now I look like freaking, I don't know, like a fist is coming through my chest because you all didn't want to just, right, pay attention, and it's like lifelong pain for the rest of my life now because you got a bunch of idiot doctors that don't want to listen to you.
So,
We went so far off topic. Is that
I know.
it's all part of cast. It's fine.
It is. It is part of cast.
No, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
No, I was going to say that if I went in and told a doctor I think I have a broken clavicle, then I get X-rayed and my clavicle is treated.
Yeah.
Letty goes into, I won't say that's not my story to tell, but they're just different. Same doctor, different results.
Right.
And
He would have X-rayed your clavicle and fixed it, and mine was just like, oh, they're just pushing it off. Oh no, they won't take my pain for real.
Right.
You know what I mean? And then it took 4 or 5 doctors later, like actually took my experience for real. But by then it was too late to do anything about it. Yeah.
All right.
That's why language matters. You got to listen.
Well, I was going to say, this is
going back.
it is part of the erasure, because I know that you're talking about your own personal experience, but this is a topic that we have talked about in all of the books that we've been reading, because the pain of women and women of color, Black women specifically, it's all the dismissal of that and the language used to describe people, women of color, Black women. It's like, it's part of this. It is part of this. I know it feels like we went off topic, but that's the conversation about language. And if, like, I'm in a doctor's office and I'm being treated a certain way and certain language is being used against me, not to treat me, but against me, like to keep me quiet, to, check off the box that they saw me as a patient and come back in 3 months and we'll see how you feel. And it's like, so for 3 months, I'm going to be in pain and confused. Okay, fine. What am I going to do about it? It's all cast. Okay. And then it all comes back to this, I think, for a lot of us that keep thinking about these things and are fighting, constantly talking and wanting to have the conversations. So many of our ancestors were forced to settle for mediocrity for the sake of being accepted in this country. And so this idea that language is evolving and we can identify in different ways, so that we can keep pushing forward and for bigger and better things for our kids, for our communities. This is sort of like the basis of that, right? That certain generations of people had to live and survive and do certain things for us to be here, continuing to advocate for what is best for us and in our community. And it always comes back to the ancestors. I feel like that's where a lot of us maybe derive a lot of our power, maybe strength, compass. I don't know. There's no map, but go ahead.
No, I'm saying this right here. This is such a huge, broad statement. I mean, that encompasses so much.
Forced to settle for mediocrity. Just to survive.
Right.
And none of us would exist if they didn't do that.
Exactly, because we know the value of our worth, and we know we're not going to get that, so we have to settle for whatever is given to us just so that we can survive in the country, which is crazy. And we're still stuck here. You know what I mean? We're stuck in mediocrity. We really are. We have to like perform 10, 20, 100 times better in the same experience just to prove that we're worth being there or being in that same space or having that same title or having that same pay. You know what I mean? Or having the same house next to you in the same block or living in the same community.
Yeah, it's exhausting.
It is.
I'm exhausted. So this is also the last thing that I wanted to pull up kind of was at the end of the chapter, and it's going to feel, I think, like we're going to go backwards a little bit, but I wanted to bring it up because I feel like this is sometimes a problem that we were talking about, like colorism in our community. So we barely even see one another in the same light. You know, we're standing in the same space and we see each other different. And this is like the intersectionality. This is the, you know, Paola Ramos traveling the country, recognizing that she is misunderstanding some of what it means to be Latino in America or Latinx in America. The different gender politics across the U.S. and different states, and how people are surviving and thriving. Detention centers along the border, you know, families being separated. All of the different ways that we can identify. And even for ourselves in our own communities, we barely see each other. You know, she's admitting that, and I know that's true too. When she poses the question, what does it mean to be American? Because this whole idea was finding Latinx in America. We all have a different version of that. So then, what does it mean to be Latino in America? What does it mean to be Latinx in America? And those are different versions also, because I'm thinking of my family. I'm thinking of my family, and the majority of my family looks like me. Actually, that's not true. They're darker than I am. If I'm being honest, I'm wet eyes, so I guess they don't look like me. And I have green eyes.
Yeah.
Gosh, I have some issues with my own identity, I am realizing. But we're not seeing ourselves or each other in the same light. And I think that's, you know, that goes back to like the whole, like what you were saying earlier about the crabs in a barrel and like all of these different things that again comes back to caste, because this is a system that was built not for us. And so we have to try to survive in it, and we need to see each other. We need to see each other.
Right. But then it goes back to caste, like you said, because they categorized us, they did with divisive systems and colorization systems and class and gender systems. And so then we're fighting amongst ourselves within our own communities because we think we're here and somebody else thinks we're there.
Mm-hmm.
And we're like, no, I'm here. No, you're here. You know what I mean? So it's, we don't see each other because we're fighting against each other because we've been divided by the system,
Mm-hmm.
basically.
Yeah. Yep. Well, this is a downer.
I know, right? I feel like I need to take a nap now.
I was like, last chapter, yay, fighting Latinx, and then it's like, oh,
No, because
we're still fighting.
Right? It's real, you know, it's real, and it's really unfortunate too, because honestly, everything she said in this book has not changed.
Right.
And I don't see it changing anytime soon. Actually, I feel like we're going backwards.
Yeah.
You know, because you got to think about it. And this is as a whole of all POC. The civil rights movement was just 56 years ago. It's not that long ago.
No.
And look where we are. We regressed. We're back in the we're back 56 years ago. We're back at the start. Everybody's doing a civil rights movement. We're starting over. We are on this gerbil wheel right now. It's insane.
Yes. Yeah, and so when we say things like, I mean, it sounds radical, but when we say things like we have to dismantle some systems, we have to, you know, like, defund the police, or like, you know, we use the word abolish or whatever, and it's like, oh my gosh, revolution is coming, we have to shut everybody down. You can't even have, you know, any kind of, you know, conversation about
Radical conversations, because then you're a moving target, basically.
Yes,
Mhm.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Okay, any last comments before we shut this down? Top of the hour.
So I'm gonna say, if I spoke out of pocket, don't come for me. We're having real conversations here.
No, we
You know?
are.
And if I made any generalizations, it wasn't out of harm or malice. I'm just gonna put it out there. I'm just being me. But I stand to be corrected. I'm open for that discussion.
I did like her comment towards the end of you know, Latinx sort of means coming out in your own way, and
Mhm.
everybody's coming out in their own way. And
Mhm.
it did get me thinking, like, you know, what way do people come out? And as they start feeling comfortable with you, and as you start to trust people that you're talking to, that's when you start coming out. That's when you start making motions to get going forward again, instead of, like you were just saying, moving backwards. And
Mhm.
um, I'm just more and more. I'm just, you know, for me, is just like starting to really listen to people, because this book was so interesting, because she started out right where we're sitting, you know, in Fresno and even in Bakersfield and this area. And so it really hit home, and I really started paying attention, like I always should be, but it just was like, oh, this is exciting. This is right here. And it means something to me. And then moving around the country and how she did that, I just think it was an exceptional book. And I really enjoyed learning from it. And so, and when I would say something off, I always had Letty here to check me. So I appreciate that, because I do need to be checked often.
Mm-hmm.
And there's nothing wrong with that. And it's good that you're open to that. You know what I mean? And that's why I said what I said too, because it's like, if any of the three of us had something that was triggering to anybody that's watching this, whatever, we're open for discussion around it. You know what I mean? So that we don't trigger, like we said, because language matters, right? And we might have got
Right.
caught up in a conversation and said something and triggered somebody else. So I always say, like, hey, if that is the case, let me know. Let's have a conversation around it. If our perspective is off, if our lens is off, and you know we're working under a misconception, you
Right.
know, hey, share that thought with us. You know, share your feelings with us. So I
Yeah.
don't do
There's
that again.
no there's
Mhm.
no coming to this as an expert. It's like we all
Right.
have
I'm
our
not an
lived
expert.
experiences, but
Right. Right. I am an expert. Nope. Not happening. By no means am I an expert. We're just totally lived experience, reading the book, what our perceptions were, and
Mhm.
that's it. You know what I mean?
Absolutely. All right. Thank you so much, Angel, for joining us for the last session. Richard, thank you for joining me for the whole semester. We will do this again in the fall. I haven't decided on the book yet. There's a couple of choices. There's always new stuff
Okay.
coming out also. So I will let everybody know. Thank you for joining us and watching the videos and commenting when you were able. And we will see you soon. Have a great Pride Month. Goodbye.
All right.
Bye.
Bye, everybody.